Hey gang, Steve Moran here with Senior Living Foresight, and I'm really excited about this live stream that I'm doing with Deborah Potter and Melissa Alano. I should have gotten it before I started, and now I probably butchered it, and I've got you on mute, so you can't even correct me, which I guess is really good, right? But one of the things that everybody is trying to figure out is what to do about occupancy and what consumers are thinking about. We have some we've got some external evidence that would suggest that there are some indications that people are still interested in senior living. I'm talking to people and they're seeing an uptick in tours, an uptick in move-in. But you guys at Sage Age Strategies have actually done some research in that area, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So, Melissa, you're going to do the primary presentation, and you're going to talk about the research, what your findings were, and then Deborah, we're going to hold you until the end. Is that correct? And to address questions and kind of what it all means. So, Melissa, I'm going to turn your microphone on, and I'm turning mine off, and I'm going to put the PowerPoint on. And so the one other thing I want to share, if you've got questions or comments, feel free to post those in the comments. We will respond verbally when we can, and then we will have some additional discussion about the findings when we walk through the findings. And so with that, I'm going to be Melissa, and you are up.
All right. Thanks so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. As Steve said, I'm going to walk through some of the findings, some of the key findings that we looked at when we did our senior living survey. I just want to point out before I start that this is kind of a brief overview. You can find our complete white paper that we did with this, as well as the study findings on our website at sageagestrategies.com. Feel free to visit our website after this and download all the information so that you can really spend some time digging into it. So just kind of a little brief background on the study and kind of what we were looking to do and how we kind of got the feedback that we did. As the pandemic kind of progressed, obviously in March with everything hitting and then kind of April and May proceeding, we saw, or I noticed that a lot of the surveys and research that had been done up until that point looked at the senior living audience or the senior audience as a whole, just the general 75 plus population. And I took a step back and thought, okay, that's great information, certainly, but for our clients, one of the most important things was really understanding what the prospective residents, the people who were in their databases, who, they had either inquired to the community or toward the community, really had some understanding of the senior living industry prior to COVID and all the craziness that came along with it. Really getting an understanding of how this has all changed their perceptions and their decisions into the future to really find out how good our databases still are. So we kind of set off on this effort to kind of try and gather this information. So we had some great client partners of ours who allowed us to utilize their databases to send this survey to kind of gather the information. And we have a good client base across the country, so we kind of covered every region of the United States in this, and we ended up with a total of 826 survey responses that we were able to analyze in this data. Obviously, being that as this was coming from databases, you're going to have some adult children in there, you're going to have some primary caregivers or the actual prospective residents. 80% of the people who responded to our survey were prospective residents, the age 70 plus, and 84% of them indicated interest in independent living. Most of the databases that we utilized were CCRCs or communities with multiple levels of care. But 84% were independent living, with 11% at assisted living and 5% at memory care. So just something to keep in mind as you're reviewing this and thinking about all of this, that this is definitely more skewed towards the independent living prospect. So we covered in the survey quite a few different topics. One of the things that I thought was important was what is their overall level of concern about COVID-19? Obviously, being a senior population, we expected that, there would be a pretty high level of concern among our target audience. And you can see that there was. About 50% of the respondents said they were either very concerned or extremely concerned about COVID-19. And that's great and good information, but then I wanted to take that one step further and say, okay, of those people who are very or extremely concerned, because they're probably the ones who would be most cautious about moving into a senior living community, a more communal setting where they're in closer contact with people. I wanted to see how that affected things. So of those who are very or extremely concerned, 85% said that they had some level of moving into senior living prior to COVID. And that dropped by about 20% to about 64% of that population. So I thought that that was pretty good news, actually, because these are, again, keeping in mind, these are the people who are either very or extremely concerned about COVID, but 65% of them are saying, yeah, I still have interest in moving into senior living. So I thought that was great. 48% of this group, again, 48%, they've not changed their plans about moving into senior living. Again, great news for us and our databases, because obviously we would expect these numbers to be higher among those who are even less concerned. And then we asked a question about whether or not they felt that they would have been safe in a senior living community during the pandemic and during all the shutdowns and everything that happened. And 35% said that they would feel safe or very safe in a community. And while another 33% said that they would feel somewhat safe. So overall, I think, that there was good news out of this. While there's obviously concern, all of us are concerned, not just the 75 plus population, but while there's concern, there's still a strong percentage of individuals who are still interested and plan to move forward with senior living. Another important piece that we looked at was what they thought were the most challenging aspects of COVID-19. Nothing earth-shattering here, but I really wanted to ask this question to really more be able to drill down on what messaging was going to be most important for people as we kind of start to remarket and say, okay, what were the hardest things for them to get through so that we can kind of say how life would have been easier or better for them in a senior living community during this time. So overall, lack of social interaction, that was hard for all of us, right? And general anxiety about the situation. Again, I think most of us struggled with that. And a boredom or lack of things to do were the big pieces that came out of the most challenging aspect for this group. There was also the concern about access to healthcare, and then the access to meals and shortage of supplies and food. I think that, all of these pieces are things that the senior living industry and kind of the lifestyle that is provided really help to improve all these things for individuals. And I think as we, take a step back and think about messaging going forward, obviously we want to focus on and continue to sell that lifestyle piece, obviously with messaging about, safety precautions and, how we're taking care of residents' health and everything, which we'll speak to in a little bit here. But continuing to reinforce how, we may have been able to maintain some social interaction during those times for residents of senior living, that there were things to do, obviously access to the supplies and the good meals. I mean, whoever thought that toilet paper would become a major issue, but it wasn't in the community. So, just those types of messages are going to be important to relay based upon the data that we gathered. So the big question is, are my prospects still interested in moving? And, I know I covered this with those who indicated that they were very or extremely concerned. But when we looked at the whole group, 84% said that they had some level of interest in moving to senior living prior to COVID-19. And now about 61% of those people say that they're still interested. So, again, more than half are saying, yep, I'm still planning to move forward. 60% said their plans have not changed. And about 22% said that they are unsure. Again, this is just saying, yeah, I'm not sure. It's not saying, nope, I'm not interested at all. So I think, you still have a good percentage there to work with, and not all is lost. And that was kind of the big piece that I wanted to come out of all of this, because I know that a lot of our clients and a lot of our communities were feeling that, challenged, to say the least, I guess is a good way to put it.
So, Melissa, one of the things,
Absolutely.
well, can you go back to that slide for just a minute? So, one of the questions that I came to my mind when I was looking at that slide was, I find myself wondering if responses pre-COVID would have really been that much different, meaning that even in a non-COVID situation, if you would ask people if they were still interested, not everybody would have said yes. Have you ever done this before in a non-COVID to know if there's a delta there, or do you have any just maybe speculation on that?
I would say that if we just pulled a database, because obviously we didn't do any cleansing of these databases, right? This was the full database, whether, they were in there in a cold lead or they were in there and they were a hot lead. Generally, we find when we do these types of surveys that it's more of the hot leads and the warm leads that are responding in general. So obviously those people, have an interest. It's not surprising to me, though, given the times and, hey, here's a survey, here's something fun to do, that we may have gotten a little bit more interaction from those cold leads or people who just didn't have as much interest. So I would say that, yes, I think you're right in kind of thinking that way and saying, okay, yeah, there's, obviously a percentage built into here that just isn't interested or would say that they aren't interested. So I think that's a good point and something to keep in mind as well. So these numbers are probably even a little better than reported here. Okay, so we know that we still have people that are interested, but then how long is it going to be until they make the move? And how has COVID affected those numbers? I was even more pleasantly surprised when we got these results back and really took a look at the time frame for moving from prior to COVID to now. If you take a look at these graphs, really, while on the now graph, you have about 19% that say they're undecided about their time frame for a move. When you really take a look at those individuals that are looking to move within the current year, it went down by about 6%. And 1 to 2 years went down by about 8%. But, they aren't as drastic of a difference as I might have expected to see. So again, another glimmer of hope and a piece of good news out of all of this, that not all is lost. And, there's still a decent percentage of people who are still thinking about making the move within the next year or two, or 3 to 5 even. So we also asked people about what their key considerations are when making a move. And I was a little bit surprised by this data because I fully expected, because COVID and health and safety is on everyone's mind, especially back in May and June when we distributed this, I really expected those to be the overwhelming responses to this. But surprisingly, finances, financial information, the cost, the whole money aspect of senior living still was the most popular response to this question. And prior to COVID, that's what we saw with these types of surveys that we would put out, that it was always related back to the cost and, how it will work financially for me. That said, this word bubble that you're seeing in front of you, kind of the larger the word, the bigger importance, or the more frequently that it was noted by people. So health and safety did come up. But I think it's important as we move forward, while we need to put messages out there that speak to, how we're keeping things safe for residents, how we're keeping them healthy, all the precautionary measures that are going into place. We don't want to lose all those other messages that have been so successful for us in the past. And we don't want to kind of glaze over all the other pieces that are important to people as they're thinking about making the move to senior living. So what's the next step? We really wanted to find out how people plan to move forward with exploring senior living. Since everything was kind of grinded to a halt, you may have had, tours that were planned and things that just kind of had to stop completely in the sales process. And as unsure as the senior living industry was about how to proceed, our prospects are just as, if not more, unsure about it. Again, same concept with this word bubble. Unknown was the most common answer, or not sure, to be determined. They really need us to tell them what the next best steps are. So I think, really being proactive in communicating to your prospects of what the options are for them to continue to pursue learning more about your community and getting more comfortable with things, and kind of moving into that next stage of the sales process. It's on our shoulders to kind of move them forward through that process and say, okay, here we can do a virtual tour, we can do all those other things, which I'm sure Deborah will mention too in this next part. But really, we need to be the driving force behind all of that. So when it comes to marketing, how do you best interact with them? And this was another surprising piece that I didn't expect coming out of this. We asked the question of, how are you socializing during the quarantine period? And not surprisingly, phone calls and emails were the most highly rated. I don't think that's surprising to anyone. Text messages was about 65%, but what I found was most interesting was video conferencing at about 52% of the individuals that we surveyed, and social media was at about 28%. I think prior to COVID even, we had a lot of clients that questioned the use of social media, but it's an inexpensive option for you. And really, if it's reaching 28% of your prospects, you should probably be giving it a shot. And video conferencing, again, now we're talking to a lot of clients about doing virtual events, doing virtual tours, all utilizing all these video conferencing capabilities to really continue to communicate with your prospects during this. And, I was happy to see that it was over half of the prospects who, had already utilized it. So I think, if you aren't thinking about that, or if you've been kind of on the fence about whether you want to try it, I think that this percentage tells us it's worth a shot and something to give a chance. So again, those were kind of some of the key findings and some of the main points that I wanted to cover during our brief time here today with Steve. Again, you can find the full survey findings with a lot more topics and information on our website. Download the white paper and the findings, or please reach out to us if you have any additional questions. And with that, Steve, I'll hand it over to you to kind of open it up for any other questions.
Great. Okay, I've got a bunch of questions here. So the first question I really want to start with is I want to go back to, and I don't know that we need this slide up, but the most challenging aspects. Melissa, I'm going to mute your mic here. I think it'll help with the feedback. The most challenging aspects of COVID-19, Deborah, and I guess you're muted too, so you can control that from your end. There we go. The most challenging aspects that I see are this whole idea of social isolation. Can you talk a little bit with us about how you message to counteract that, to respond to this social isolation concern?
Absolutely. And, I think Melissa hinted at that these are things that we've been good at for a long time. So if you read one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, I think it's Tipping Point, he talks about 10,000 hours equals competence. So if you've been doing something for 10,000 hours, you're good at it. And people in history who have come across historic changes when they already had that competence behind them are the ones who have succeeded in the new environment. So that, using that logic, senior living is absolutely poised to do better at that than anyone else, because we've been we've been the connectors, right? We've been the community builders all along. Now, did we have to shift that a little bit and get creative? Absolutely. You know, our communities were challenged sometimes with how to connect even within our buildings, but we saw amazing levels of creativity, you know, tents going up outside so that people could dine, use outside dining, so that social connection could happen in a safe way. I saw one community do plexiglass between, so people were still connecting. You saw the hallway engagement. Like, this is just what we're good at and what we do. And I think people were understanding in a really exacerbated way in the moment, like social isolation is real. And if anything happens in our personal lives or as a culture or a world, it gets really bad really fast. Here's an antidote to it. Which is
one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about as I've been talking to people and talking to even the people who are not in senior living about senior living. I think in some respects, I worry a lot that we're our own worst enemy. That we think less of our industry than the public does. I'm working very hard to have conversations with 3 to 5 executive level people in the industry every week, and there's a couple of consistent themes. But one of those is that they're actually seeing a significant uptick in both, and particularly in move-ins. I've got a good friend who's a salesperson who has taken 30 reservations in the last 40 days in a single community, right? And the only reason his pace has slowed down is that his company has not been doing enough advertising and he has no more leads to work with. But he's actually done 30 tours and taken 30 reservations, if you can believe that. So another question is, are you advocating using images and marketing, social distancing, but social interactions with residents and staff?
Steve, I didn't quite hear the question. I don't know if Melissa did.
Yeah, so let me read it again. Are you advocating using images and marketing messaging that shows physical distance, but social interactions with residents and staff?
Melissa, you want to take that one or you want me to?
Your microphone's off, Melissa. Oh, wait, I got it. Maybe I have control over that. Okay, go.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I think that, hopefully this isn't going to last forever. I think that, when we talk about using images in our advertising and everything going forward, I think that right now, yes, it's probably smart to show social distancing in those images to kind of further relay and reduce confusion, really, that, we're maintaining all these safe practices and everything. But, hopefully there'll be a time some months down the road where that isn't going to be that big of an issue. Deborah, I don't know if you feel differently about that kind of in general, but, I think it's on us to relay how we are keeping our residents safe and healthy. And I think, kind of doing that through images too is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say also that we can think about it from a solution standpoint. If you think about what's most important, it's the experience of the individual. Are they thriving in our community, whether it's because they're connecting, whether it's because they have supplies, whether it's because they have leadership. And so changing our focus maybe in terms of images from people gathering to the experience of one individual, I think is also a powerful way to make sure we don't lose that we communicate how that individual is feeling within our community and that visceral response to it, but also not have to do the complex thing of like, how do I do a photo shoot right now? And how do I make sure people are safe and the proper distance away, et cetera?
One of the working on a couple of articles over the weekend that relative to COVID and marketing and how we perceive ourselves, and I spent quite a bit of time knocking around. I probably visited a dozen or so senior living corporate sites. And there were two things I found that were really interesting. One was that in about 25% of the sites, so, call it 3 to 5 of the sites I visited, it was all COVID all the time. And frankly, I was a little surprised, even bothered by it, because I think ultimately when people are looking, if they're going to end up landing on a senior living site, at some point in time, they're going to ask the question of, well, what about COVID-19? But really, they want to know about the other stuff because they know everybody, assumes that at some point in time we're going to get a handle, and we're already getting a handle on COVID-19. And the other thing, just sort of as an aside, and I've written about both of these things, is that on some of the sites, not so much CCRC, of course, but in some of the other sites, I found it's like they've given up the fight for lifestyle, and that the whole focus is on the care component. And I'm not sure that that's how we ultimately win this whole senior living battle in the eyes of the public. Can you talk a little bit how you work with your clients about how the kinds of messages that you're sending to as you're looking to do lead generation, or are you doing lead generation? Deborah? Melissa, who is going to go? Deborah, go.
I'll go first, and then Melissa can follow. So the last part of your question, Steve, is sort of still ringing in my ears, and you may even have to repeat the first half because I got so stuck on that mentally. Absolutely keep doing lead generation. I mean, I was preaching that. We were preaching that from the moment this became a crisis. We had clients and others who were saying, oh, we're just going to stop. We're going to send our salespeople home, not just working from home, but like not working because we have to pause everything. We can't think about what's happening. And we were saying, look, you got to keep your head down and your head up at the same time. Let your sales department be the head up people, because in 60, 90, 120 days, you don't want to be looking at your bottom line going, wait a minute, we didn't cultivate anyone. And I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes operationally in senior living with sales, where we think we're only selling if people can come in the door right now. But we know that's not true. There's a lead time depending on care environment. If you're CCRC, the lead time is like 9 months. And even for assisted living and memory care, it's a quarter. And if you're looking at the 9 people we don't tend to close because their, conversion rates are 1 out of 10, then you're looking at longer, right? And so you can never stop. And then this hooks in with the question you asked first, Steve, which is what kinds of messages should dominate the airwaves. And the thing we have to remember is everything someone was concerned about or interested in, and Melissa's survey so shows this just dominantly before COVID-19, they're still interested in now. The concern over finances has not gone away. It will never go away. The concern over, if you look at what was affecting people's life most, social isolation, which speaks to the lifestyle piece, Steve, that has not gone away. If anything, it's gotten more important to people. So if all people see when they come to your website is COVID-19, yes, we have to address that, but that is of course we're going to be safe message, because we always have been. And by the way, here's the main thing we do that you've always been interested in, and you're interested even more now, and we're interested in sharing with you even more now. Melissa, did you have something to add to that?
The reason that people choose to move to a community is for the lifestyle. And I think that that's the most important thing that we can keep in mind through this, because, it's more of that real estate and making my life better and easier. And so we need to make sure we're relaying those messages, just like Deborah said.
Okay, I have one more. We're just about out of time, but I've got one more question that I want to toss at you before we call it quits. I found it really interesting, the slide you put up on how to interact. Can you just talk? I mean, phone I get, email I get, but how are people using? I mean, 51%, almost 52% are using video conferencing and social media. Maybe you can just talk for a couple minutes about what that looks like, sort of mechanically, in case people are struggling in those two areas.
Yeah, so I will say that shame on us, I think as an industry, really underestimated our prospective residents. They have stepped up. It has been a lifeline for them. How great and interesting that our children gave our seniors, the technology that our kids use all the time is a gift to our seniors so they can connect with each other, and that we can use to connect with our prospective residents throughout this strange time. If your prospective resident does not use virtual technology, they're missing an opportunity to not just connect with you, but to connect with their family and their grandchildren and friends during this time of isolation. It is again their lifeline. If they haven't used it, use it yourself. Use the phone to teach them how to use it so that they can then connect with all of those people. And what a great next step for you, and what a great connecting opportunity for you to say, let's get on the phone and let me walk you through how you use Zoom. It's really not hard. Let me walk you through how you use FaceTime. And then what comes for that is you can say, and by the way, now that you know how to use it, let's get on FaceTime next week and let's do a virtual visit where we talk through what's important to you. And then I show you a little bit of the community. And I would add, Steve, that the other thing that people are tempted to do over virtual technology is change the nature of their visit such that it's only a real estate tour. And that's a huge mistake. Virtual technology, face-to-face interaction is still face-to-face interaction. It gives us the opportunity to go deeper than just voice-to-voice, and therefore is a great next step, even if it's just a conversation. So you can have a phone call that leads to a virtual face-to-face visit that then leads to a virtual tour, which is a great sales process. Maybe we've even added to our arsenal instead of being hindered.
So I really love that. I think that as you were talking, the thing that sort of rattles through my head is that, in some sense, one of the silver linings of the COVID pandemic and not being able to do physical tours is that two things. One is that it means that your prospects are actually more isolated and more lonely than they likely have ever been in their whole lives. And so it gives you this very unique, it takes time, and time is precious, but because they have a need, your ability to then have these interactions with people and build the relationships could actually make this, maybe the next 6 months could end up being the best occupancy, the highest conversion, because there's this very unique opportunity to be able to deepen those relationships. And if you have deep relationships, they're a ton more likely to move in. So with that, I think we're about out of time. I want to sort of see Melissa, Deborah, great conversation. Any last words from either of you? We will also put the link to Sage Age Strategies website in the comments after this is over, so you can go link and download the study as well. But let's start with you, Melissa. First, do you have any last words or wisdom you'd like to share with us?
No, I think just, keeping in mind, as we were just talking, kind of don't stop with your marketing. These prospects are still interested, still need you to help them through the sales process and let them know what the next step is that makes sense. Just do everything you can to keep them engaged and keep them moving along. And I think, that the next couple months don't have to look bad for us. I think there's lots of opportunity out there.
Perfect. And Deborah?
And I would just sort of add to what Melissa said in the sense of being emotional leaders. You look at some of the things she discovered people are struggling to figure out what the next steps are. They're still interested, but Melissa, you made such a good point that we need to be that for them. So, and Steve, you said sometimes I think we think worse of our industry than our prospects do. Be the emotional leaders that they need to bring them out of this anxiety instead of letting them stay in it or joining them in it. We can lift them up instead of down.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. And, you know, we are in the best business in the world. We're changing people's lives, both residents, both families, and our team members. We're making the world a better place. Thank you for what you are doing in this very, very difficult time. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, everybody.